part of our show, call 872-0750. That's 872-0750. Now, here's Paul Gonzales.
AM 750 WS. Don't forget, if you're a Bell South Mobility customer, you can call our talk show for free. Thank you. You heard the man say 50,000 watts. At midnight, we're going to go up to 150,000 watts. Oh, but that's illegal. Those of you who know the radio business, the FCC would get us, right? Now we're going to add on our 50,000 watt affiliate or sister station in Los Angeles, KFI, and also the 50,000 watt monster in Dayton, Ohio, WHIO. And our program will be heard in a good portion of the United States. One of our guests will be Merrill Simon, Middle East expert. He's in Israel, went there on purpose knowing that the crisis is boiling because he wants to be with his sons and his 10 grandchildren. Last night, Merrill was on our show, and he told us that he's very concerned, and a very sad story. The 4 of his grandchildren have to have gas tents because they're too small to wear the gas mask. And we'll find out what the mood is in Israel at midnight, or very near midnight our time, which is going to be tomorrow morning in Israel. A lot of folks are very interested in the biblical prophecies concerning the Middle East. Many, many preachers across the United States are saying that this Middle East crisis is a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. And we're very delighted to have theologian Dr. John F. Walvoord with us tonight. He has been on radio stations probably all day around the United States, and he's the author of Armageddon, Oil, and the Middle East Crisis. And, Doctor, we'd like to welcome you to WSB here in Atlanta and all over the East tonight. How are you, sir?
I'm just fine, thank you.
I bet you're tired out. I understand you've done numerous radio stations
Well,
today.
I'm used to it, I think.
Well, tell me a little bit about yourself, in addition to being an author.
Well, I was on the faculty at Dallas Theological Seminary for 50 years, served as president the last 33, and then in 1986 I retired from the presidency and became chancellor, and I'm still occupied full-time and I'm doing a lot of speaking and writing, but that's my life. I'm getting up there.
Well, now, do you see this is obviously an oversimplification, but do you see this crisis relating to what is known as Armageddon?
Yes and no. The two dangers in study of prophecy is most of the church just neglect what prophecy says. They don't pay any attention to the particulars, and that's wrong. And then others pay attention to the particulars, but then they add to it their own ideas, and of course that's wrong. And the conservative position which I'm trying to take is to limit myself to what the Bible actually says, but pay very close attention to what it says, and you have to pay attention to what it doesn't say. And I think that saves you a lot of trouble. Now, Armageddon is actually a place. It's the Mount of Megiddo in northern Israel, and it's the center of the final world war. But in my understanding of prophecy, that's down the road many years yet ahead. This present war is not Armageddon.
Oh, I'm relieved because I wasn't quite sure.
Well, World War I, World War II, and this present war were not in Scripture, but Christ did say, Matthew 24, that wars and rumors of wars would continue to the end. And that came to mind, of course, when they had the warming of the Cold War in Europe. People said, "Ma, we got peace at last." I said, "Now, wait a minute." And we didn't have to wait very long before this Middle East crisis came up.
The number in Atlanta, and I noticed you knew that I was going to have this subject on tonight. The number in Atlanta is 872-0750, but all of the Atlanta lines are totally tied up. So those of you who want to ask questions, we're going to get to you in just a moment. Does the Gulf crisis, is it any way related to what it says in the Bible as a prelude?
Yes, I think so. You see, if you go back 50 years, teachers of prophecy said that Israel would go back to the land. They told them that had never happened. Well, of course, it has happened. They were told that the Middle East would be the center of conflict, war, and trouble in the end time, but in relation to the second coming of Christ. They said the Middle East would never amount to anything. It didn't have population, wealth, or influence. And, of course, that all changed when oil came along, and now the whole world's got their eyes focused on the Middle East. So what we're seeing is the tension of the world on the Middle East, and I think this is the prelude for end-time events. And while I don't have a calendar, that is, I can't tell you years or how long it's going to take, it seems very likely that this is going to end up in the things that the Bible predicts for the end of the age.
Is Saddam Hussein the evil leader that the Bible talks about?
I don't think he's mentioned in the Bible. He's not the world ruler of the future, no.
Now, what about oil? Does the Bible
The Bible never mentions oil. It mentions that there's going to be a 10-nation group in the Middle East that's going to be banded together politically, and that's more than what the common market is, and it'll include European nations and other nations in the Mediterranean area. But it never mentions how they're banded together or why, and I think one of the reasons those 10 nations get together is to police the Middle East and keep the oil flowing.
Let me turn you over to our callers because they're ready for you, and let's go right to our first caller in Ohio, and that's Pat in Mansfield, Ohio. No, Pat's gone. We'll get back to that caller in a moment. Ron in Carrollton, Georgia. You're on AM 750 WSB. Hello, Ron.
Good evening, Paul.
How are you?
Fine, thanks. I was just calling to respond, and I'll make this brief, to a caller earlier who was saying that we were in the Middle East for a humanitarian reason.
I'm sorry, but that's not the subject now. I guess you weren't paying attention. We have a different guest, different subject, but thank you anyway. Next caller will be Cindy in Gwinnett County. You're on AM 750 WSB.
Hi, how are you doing?
Fine.
Good. Listen, I would like to speak to the gentleman about, he was talking about, is this Armageddon? And I sat in and I did read the whole book of Revelation this afternoon, and of course praying for peace and hoping that everything works out. But there was something that really kind of spooked me, and it's in Revelations 18 verse 21, and it says, "And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down and shall be found no more at all." And in my Bible reference map, it shows Babylon as being right in the middle of the Euphrates and the Tigris River.
Yeah, Iraq is right in that area where ancient Babylon was. That's an interesting point. Can you give her an answer, Doctor?
Yes, I believe in the future Babylon is going to grow to be a great city. In fact, there are some that feel that the final world government, which will include every country in the world, will have Babylon as its capital, because Babylon is mentioned particularly in Revelation chapter 18. You quoted perhaps a different version, but Revelation 18 speaks of Babylon as a great city. Now, it's going to be destroyed completely. Both the Old and New Testament tell us that, but it's in connection with the second coming of Christ. It occurs just before the second coming, and that's years away, so it's not something that's going to happen right now.
Thank you for your call. Next one will be Bruce in Mableton, and Bruce, you're on AM 750 WSB.
Yes, I'd like to know from the caller. You referred to Saddam Hussein as being a modern-day Nebuchadnezzar.
Right.
I'd like to know if he could expound on that and the rebuilding of the old Babylon the way that it was, if Iraq is going to have the riches flow into them through the oil. Does he know anything biblically that could say that he would be like Nebuchadnezzar was?
Well, Nebuchadnezzar was the great king of Babylon. He came to the throne in 605 B.C., and he reigned for 40 years or more. And Daniel, of course, the prophet, was his right-hand man, his prime minister, if you want to call him that. And he built a tremendous kingdom and also built the great city of Babylon with all sorts of wonderful things, buildings, temples, gardens, roads, streets, and everything, and became the greatest city of the world. Now, the Babylonian Empire finally fell, and Nebuchadnezzar, of course, died. He died before it fell. But the city of Babylon is still there. Now, through the centuries, it's gradually declined. At the time of Christ, it still was quite a flourishing city. That was years after Nebuchadnezzar. And then in modern times, it gradually went down and down, but it's never been totally uninhabited. Now, the Bible pictures the fact that ultimately Babylon is going to be destroyed and no one's going to ever live there again. Now, that's connected to the second coming of Christ. It's not current. Now, Hussein is attempting to restore Babylon as a tourist attraction. I'm not sure that he wants to make it his capital yet. Baghdad, of course, is his capital, but I'm not sure he wants to do that. But he's rebuilt some of the temples and restored some of the things. They think they've found the palace and the room where Daniel saw the handwriting on the wall in Daniel 5. In other words, I haven't been to Babylon. Some of my friends have, and they say it's very electrifying to see these areas that once were so alive in the time of Babylon. But it's not a big city yet, but it may be if I understand the scriptures correctly.
Now, in any way, is Saddam Hussein playing a part in the history as prophesied in the Bible?
As far as I'm concerned, no. I think he's a temporary person like Mussolini and Stalin and Hitler. He's coming on the scene for a time, but I think he's going to pass off the scene. I don't visualize him as the ultimate person, and actually he's not going to be the one that really builds Babylon. The final world empire, according to Scripture, is a Roman empire. Now, it covered where Babylon was. It covered the whole Mediterranean area, southern Europe, Western Asia, northern Africa. But Babylon may be the capital of that world empire that's in the last 3.5 years before the second coming. And at that time, it will be a great and luxurious city.
What's it going to be like, the second coming? I mean, are we going to have fire all over the earth and all kinds of terrible things?
Well, it's a time of judgment, and that's why some people don't like the doctrine. But according to Revelation 19, it pictures a gigantic procession from heaven to earth of angels, millions of them, and saints that have gone to heaven. And they're coming from heaven to the earth to set up Christ's kingdom, his 1,000-year kingdom on earth, as Revelation 20 explains.
And I want to get more from you on that, because that's what everybody wants to know. What will Armageddon be like? But we have to take care of some business here. We want to bring you up to date on what's going on right now in the Middle East.
Crisis in the Gulf updates from the AM 750 WSB News Center.
This is a live special report from AP Network News, Crisis in the Gulf. Good evening to you, I'm Bob Moon. 100 minutes. It's come down to this. The time remaining before the UN deadline for Iraq to clear out of Kuwait can now be measured in minutes. And still, there is no word of any indication that Iraq might retreat. Saddam Hussein was at the front in occupied Kuwait today, urging his troops to be prepared and vowing there will be no compromise. At the White House, meantime, President Bush spent some time praying with clergymen over the telephone and met with his national security advisors. The AP's Wendell Gola reports the president's spokesman says he planned to watch the late news tonight and then go to bed with no other action contemplated.
There are no more calls to make, say the president's aides. Nothing but the order to be given, they suggest, to send the multinational force into action in the Persian Gulf. Officials won't say if Bush has decided to give the order, but spokesman Marlon Fitzwater said Monday every moment past midnight is borrowed time for Iraq. Lawmakers say Bush has promised only to inform them of military action, and that, they say, could come as the fighting begins.
On this anniversary of the birth of Martin Luther King Jr., peace demonstrators gathered outside the United Nations again tonight after the leader of the World Organization made one last appeal for Saddam Hussein to withdraw from Kuwait. Javier Perez de Cuellar pledged to work toward resolving the Palestinian issue if Iraq leaves. This has been a live special report from AP Network News, Crisis in the Gulf. I'm Bob Moon, and this is the Associated Press Radio Network.
AM 750 WSB monitors the Gulf story around the clock with updates every hour and half hour, and we'll break in with new developments as they happen on AM 750 WSB.
Thanks, Bob. 1021 here with Paul Gonzales on AM 750 WSB. Our guest is theologian Dr. John F. Walvoord, who wrote the book Armageddon, Oil and the Middle East Crisis. I'm going to give you an 800 number in a few minutes so that you can order this book. If you choose, you can just go to your bookstore. Many bookstores have it, or they'll get it for you. Now, Doctor, you say that the Iraqi crisis, the Middle East crisis, is the prelude to Armageddon, right?
Yes.
Does this mean the prelude to Western civilization?
Well, obviously, if you have a world government in the Middle East, and the United States is not even mentioned in the end time, apparently we're not going to have the power and prestige we have today, and Western civilization won't flourish like it is today. I don't think it's going to be destroyed right away, but it will be seriously hurt by the catastrophes that precede the second coming of Christ.
World government in the Middle East. Could it be, are you saying like one person controlling this world government?
Yes, that's what's going to happen, and it's strange to say the Bible pictures it as occurring 3.5 years before the second coming, and it's done by proclamation, not by war. And I think the only explanation I can give for that is that he controls all the oil of the Middle East, and no one can fight against him. The Bible asks the question, who can make war with the beast, referring to this person? And the answer is nobody. And he has satanic power. He's a brilliant person. He's going to be a great world leader. People are going to think he's going to lead them out of their troubles. And actually, he leads them into disaster.
So the one who controls the oil is going to be the one who controls the earth?
I think so. And that's what Saddam Hussein wants. He wants the oil so he can control. He can be the most powerful person in the world if he ever got those Middle East countries under his wing.
It's not going to be him, but it's going to be somebody in that part of the world.
That's right.
Now, you have no idea, nobody has any idea when this will be, but could it be as early as, let's say, people talk about the end times, could it be in 10 years?
Could be shorter than that. I visualize that the United States is not going to be able to stay in the Middle East very long. Whether we have war or peace, we're not welcome there, really. And what they need is a force there that's not the United States, and it would make an awful lot of sense. So the Bible doesn't say this, that the 10-nation group the Bible does predict is that peacekeeping force. Well, the problem is that a dictator arises who gains control of the 10 countries. And that's exactly what Hussein wants, but he's not the person who's going to do it. And when they do this, when he gets this, he's going to make a 7-year covenant of peace with Israel, settle that problem, apparently. For the first 3.5 years, he'll observe it. Then the second 3.5, he becomes the world ruler. And he's an atheist. He's satanic. He's against Christians and Jews and anybody who doesn't accept him as God. And this brings the terrible judgments of the book of Revelation down on him that decimates the earth and destroys its cities and destroys most of the people of the earth.
So this could be in less than 10 years.
Could be. Doesn't have to be.
It could be in 7 years.
That's right.
But it won't
well,
be...
it might take a little longer than 7 years, but you see, we haven't got this 10-nation group. The common market of Europe is not that 10-nation group, in my estimation.
What will the 10-nation group be?
Bible doesn't give us the names. That's why there's been speculation for centuries on that.
So anyway, it could be in less than 10 years, bottom line, right?
That's right.
And there's nothing we can do about it, right?
Well, I think we should pray, and we're living in an evil world, and Christians have to adjust to that, and a lot of things happen that are wrong, and God permits it. But it's part of God's judgment on a wicked world that these things happen.
Now, this guy in the Middle East, is he what is commonly known as the Antichrist?
Yes, the Bible never expressly calls him that. It calls him the man of sin, calls him the beast, the willful king, and different titles like that. But he's never ever called the Antichrist specifically, but he is anti instead of he's against Christ, and he's also anti in the sense of instead of Christ, he's Satan's substitute for Jesus Christ.
He's a demon.
Well, he's actually a man, but he's demon-possessed.
Ed in Atlanta's next. Ed, you're on AM 750 WSB.
Oh, hi.
How are you, Ed?
Fine. Just want to ask him, what happened during World War II? Were there people also saying that would be about the end of the world at that time?
Yes, every time we have a major war, someone thinks it's the end. When World War I, there were Bible teachers that said this is the final world war. They were wrong. And then World War II came along, and they said the same thing, and they were wrong. And people that are saying that this Iraq war is the final world war are also wrong. It doesn't fit the Bible picture, and I believe it has to fit precisely.
Good question. Thank you. And our next one's Sydney in Decatur. Sydney, you're on AM 750 WSB.
Yes, we're getting a little interference there, but I hope it's not too bad. I wanted to ask him about the disciples asked Jesus Christ for a sign, and he told them in two different places in Matthew and Luke, I don't know exactly where, but he said, when Jerusalem is surrounded by armed forces, that generation shall not pass.
Okay, comment about that, Doctor?
Yes, that's Matthew 24 in other Gospels. What Christ is referring to is what Christ referred to in Matthew 24 as the Great Tribulation. That's the title that is found in the Old Testament as well as in the New Testament. It's the unprecedented time of trouble of 3.5 years that precedes the second coming of Christ. And it begins, according to Christ, Matthew 24:15, with the desecration of the temple. Now this introduces a whole new subject. A temple has to be built still, and the sacrifices of the Jewish Mosaic order are reinstalled by Orthodox Jews. And then at the 3.5 year period before the second coming, these sacrifices are stopped. And that's the beginning of the Jewish persecution at the end, and that's the signal Christ gave them to flee to the mountains and get away because they were going to be persecuted.
Our number in Atlanta is 872-0750. Anywhere else, 1-800-WSB-TALK. Don't forget, we'll be switching live to Israel a little later on tonight and check in on Merrill Simon. He's there. We talked to him briefly last night. He's a Middle East expert, and he's going to tell us what the feeling is tonight in Israel. Some people maintain that there is a possibility, not a good possibility, but a possibility that Saddam Hussein may attack Israel before we attack him. And we'll find out what's going on over that way. And then at 12 midnight, we'll join California and the Midwest, and we'll talk all over the country and welcome KFI in Los Angeles and also WHIO in Dayton, and we'll get some opinions from people all over this United States. Our guest
say peace efforts have been exhausted. The UN Security Council's given up trying to make a last-ditch proposal. The UN Secretary General, though, Javier Perez de Cuellar, made one last appeal to Saddam Hussein tonight to either pull out or face a devastating war. So far, no response from Baghdad. Saddam Hussein was seen on Iraqi TV, said to be visiting troops in Kuwait and declaring they are ready to fight. An aide to President Bush says he's ready to make what they called tough decisions, but gave no indication if Mr. Bush will order U.S. and allied forces into action at midnight. The UN deadline now 90 minutes away. Congressman Henry Gonzales of Texas says he'll offer a resolution to begin impeachment proceedings against President Bush. Gonzales says Mr. Bush has exceeded his constitutional authority in leading the United States close to war. And Atlanta police say they'll send divers into a lake in Piedmont Park to look for a missing Georgia Tech student. He disappeared early Saturday. His wallet was found not far from the lake. AM 750 WSB, the only station with our own helicopter and airplane, depend on Skycopter Skyplane traffic. Now, Atlanta's most accurate weather with WSB meteorologist Kurt Mellish.
The WSB exclusive 5-day forecast. Rain likely tonight, areas of fog, possibly heavy rain at times, lows 44 to 48. Then for tomorrow, rain diminishing and mostly cloudy, high near 52, low near 30.
You're listening to AM 750, WSB, and Sound Off. To be a part of our show, call 872-0750. That's 872-0750. Now, here's Paul Gonzales.
And Dr. John Walvoord, who is a biblical scholar and the author of Armageddon, Oil, and the Middle East. Recapping, for those of you just tuning in, I hope I get this right now. This Iraqi crisis is a prelude to Armageddon. Saddam Hussein is not the bad guy. He's not the Antichrist. But someone will appear in the Middle East, and there will be a one-world government. And then after 7 years, life as we know it will end on earth. Is that basically it, John?
No, I don't believe it'll end. I think Christ will return, but in my sequence, Revelation 20 says he'll reign on earth for 1,000 years, the millennial kingdom, as it's explained in both the Old and New Testament. And then at the end of that, then our present earth will be destroyed, a new heaven, new earth created, a new Jerusalem, the heavenly city will descend, and that'll be the home of all those that are saints, all those that are saved, that are right with God throughout eternity future.
Now, when this period, when Christ comes back, is there going to be all kinds of calamities?
Yes, it pictures him. You see, there's a world war going on, and the forces of millions of people, when they see the glory of Christ filling the heavens, and every eye is going to see him, Revelation 1:7 tells us, the whole earth will be able to witness it. And when they see him, they forget their differences because they all are satanic in power, and they're going to attack Christ, or try to. But he just speaks the word. The Bible speaks of the sword out of his mouth in Revelation 16, and the scriptures are very plain that the entire army is wiped out and they'll be instantly killed. And then there follows a series of judgments, and those that are worthy are allowed to enter into the millennial kingdom.
But the rest of the people are going to be dead.
That's right.
Next call is going to be Irv in Baltimore, Maryland, and you're on AM 750 down here in Atlanta. How are you, Irv?
Good evening, sirs. How are you all?
We're doing fine.
Good. I would like to ask about the text in Jeremiah 50, 51, 52, which describes the destruction of Chaldea. And I'm wondering if that's appropriate for the present time.
Well, let me be ignorant here. Where is Chaldea?
That's one of the old names for Mesopotamia or Iraq.
Babylon.
And Babylon, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The answer is simple. That passage was partially fulfilled in the Old Testament, but not completely, because Babylon was not destroyed, as this passage indicates. And that's reserved for the period just before the second coming. And you go to the New Testament, Revelation 18, chapter 18, and that entire chapter talks about this destruction of Babylon.
Next call, Mark in Atlanta. Mark, you're on AM 750 WSB.
Yeah, I was wondering if this in any way correlates with Nostradamus' predictions of the coming of a third Antichrist, with Napoleon being the first one, and Hitler being the second one, and possibly Saddam Hussein being the third.
Well, I don't think it's established that the other two are Antichrist. There's a lot of Antichrists according to the Bible. Anybody who's opposed to Christ or tries to take Christ's place is an Antichrist. There's been many of these. But the Antichrist, the main one, is the final world ruler, and he hasn't appeared yet.
What about Nostradamus? Anything to his predictions?
I don't take much credence in him.
A lot of people tell me he just made hundreds of predictions, and a handful came close to being somewhat related to the future?
Well, the test of any prophecy is when it's fulfilled. Is it fulfilled literally? And the problem with a lot of prophecies of human origin is they never fulfilled accurately.
Robert, Gwinnett County, you're on AM 750 WSB.
Yes. I was curious as to, I'm not very well read in the Bible, and I was curious if you could give me some specific Bible verses that talk about what's going on in the Gulf right now.
Oh, as I explained before, I don't think the Bible speaks of this present conflict, nor does it speak of Hussein, but it does say that there will be wars and rumors of wars to the end. It does say that the Middle East, that whole area there, the Mediterranean, including Saudi Arabia and Iraq and Israel, that all of this will be the center of conflict and war at the end time. And that's where the main interest of the world is going to be, and that's where the political power and the wealth is going to be, according to Scripture. So that's all I can say. What we're seeing is not a specific fulfillment, but a general coincidence of what the Bible predicts for the end time.
The beginning of something happening in the Middle East.
Right.
Next call will be Delia in Smyrna. Delia, you're on AM 750 WSB.
Hi, Paul.
Boy, I knew you'd like this show tonight, Delia.
Oh, yeah, I've taught this for years. There's more to Armageddon than a lot of things just almost as bad as Armageddon. It's going to happen just before it happens. Now, in the 16th chapter of Revelation, you will note that there's 7 plagues that's going to fall on this earth. Probation closes. When those plagues begin to fall, our cases are decided for heaven or hell.
What about these plagues?
Well, they're called vials or bowls of the wrath of God, and they are devastating. They're extensive things that damage and destroy the whole earth. And the final one's a great earthquake that it says it causes the cities of the Gentiles to fall. Apparently, Jerusalem is not affected, but the rest of the world is. And the world is going to be left in shambles. It pictures mountains disappearing, islands disappearing. You can imagine tidal waves and the destruction of human life. It's almost impossible to imagine a scene that's worse. And it's at the climax of this that Jesus Christ comes back.
So this could be, all these plagues could be less than 10 years away.
Oh, yes. And it's much worse than Armageddon. He's right. Armageddon is just a place. It's the final battle. But prior to that, the world is practically destroyed.
Can you give me just a rough idea of some of the other plagues?
Yes. The Bible pictures, well, usually they have a whole series of plagues. First, they have 7 trumpets, and then they have these 7 vials, and each one of them affects the earth. The trumpets affect a third of the earth. The thing about the vials is it affects all the earth, and there's a whole chapter in the Bible given to it. For instance, the first one is a bowl that's poured out on the land, and sores break out on the people. And the second angel, the seas turn to blood. The third one, the rivers and springs of waters turn to blood. The fourth is on the sun and the moon, and it scorches. It changes the climate. People are scorched with fire. And the fifth one is the world plunged into darkness, and men are given terrible pain. It says that men gnawed their tongues in agony and cursed the God of heaven because of their pains and their sores. And so it goes on. The 7th vial that I talked about is a severe earthquake. It said it's an earthquake that has never occurred before since man has been on the earth, so tremendous was the quake. And it says every island fled away and mountains could not be found. And then on top of that, there's a huge storm with hailstones weighing 100 pounds each pelting the earth. You can't imagine a greater scene of destruction than the Bible describes here.
Good question. Good comments, Delia. Thank you. It's 10:39, and our guest is Dr. John F. Walvoord, and he's the author of Armageddon, Oil, and the Middle East. If you want to get it, go to your bookstore, or if you live out in the sticks somewhere and you're a long way from the bookstore, you can call 1-800-444-4012. 1-800-444-4012. Please take down that number. Don't go bothering us tomorrow, okay, like you always do. Please, please. It's 10:40. Hopefully we'll get a call into Israel and talk to Dr. Merrill Simon, find out what's going on and what the mood is of the people as they brace for a possible attack by Saddam Hussein. It's 10:41. I just saw Andy Young walk by. I guess he's going to be on WSB News sometime later on tonight. Live, we have Dr. John F. Walvoord, the author of Armageddon, Oil, and the Middle East Crisis. One thing about this book is somebody like me who doesn't know that much about the Bible can learn this. This is written for everybody, right, Doctor?
That's right. We've had a lot of non-Christians read it and read it with zest. I mean, they like it.
Our next caller has a great biblical name, Joshua in Riverdale. You're on AM 750 WSB.
How you doing?
All right, Joshua.
I'd first of all like to say that my brother is in the Middle East, and I'm telling you what, he's ready to go. He's ready to go kick some butt. I'm telling you what. And I'd like to say that I see in the book of Jeremiah that the Bible does talk about this war in the Middle East that's coming up. It says in chapter 49, verse 28, that concerning Kedar, which is actually a city in southern Iraq, which is to the west of Kuwait, says that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, will smite. And then later it comes on and it says, arise and go up to Kedar and spoil the men of the east. Now, you know, this is the east of Kedar. And then,
I think that's pronounced Qatar, isn't it, Doctor?
I wouldn't know without looking it up.
Do you know anything about what this caller's talking about?
Yeah, well, the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah lived 600 years before Christ. He wrote the book of Jeremiah. He was a captive of the Babylonian captivity, and he predicted the downfall of Babylon. Now, there's a dual fulfillment here. Babylon fell to the Medes and the Persians in the year 539 BC when they conquered Babylon, the city. But the ultimate fall of Babylon is still future, and it's related to the second coming. So you have to read these prophecies. Some have been fulfilled, some haven't.
Thank you for your call, Joshua, and I'll be pulling and hoping that everything turns out fine for your brother. He mentioned that his brother was gung-ho in this war. From a biblical perspective, Doctor, should we be involved in this?
Well, I don't see how we can avoid it. I'm not an expert on politics, and I think history will have to view what we're doing now, and he probably has a better guess than we have. But I don't see how Hussein was going to give in to anything. I don't see how anything but war is going to stop him, much like Hitler in World War II. We had to either give all of Europe to Hitler or fight him. And I think we'd have to give all the oil countries to Hussein or fight him, and that seems to be the issue. Now, I may be wrong. The Bible doesn't tell us what the answer to that is.
But see, what I'm thinking is if this is going to happen anyway, that somebody's going to rise up out of the Middle East and control the world and be the Antichrist, what good is it for us to be fooling around with something that's inevitable?
Well, we're living in an evil world, but I think we have to make the best of our situation, and we have to do the best we can under the circumstances, and we can't relax and say, well, it's going to go bad anyway, what's the use? We can't live that way. We have to make the best of our situation.
And at least we got at least 7 or 8 years before the inevitable will happen anyway.
Yeah, well, if you're a Christian, I believe the Christians are going to be taken out of this thing before it ever happens, so our hope is not to be here.
Oh, that's the rapture, right?
That's right.
In other words, if I'm a born-again Christian and I trust that Jesus died for my sins, then I'm just going to disappear before all these plagues happen.
Yes, and that could happen any day. That isn't dated in the Bible, except that I believe it's before all these events. You see, the Bible doesn't date the rapture, and they could have happened in the 1st century as far as our knowledge is concerned. But what the Bible does describe in great detail is the events that will follow the rapture, and that's what I've been talking about. Now, the world stage is getting ready for those events. Well, in that case, if the rapture's first, the rapture becomes very near.
What if the pilot of an airplane is a born-again Christian and is swept up by the rapture, and maybe some of the other people on the plane are also born-again Christians? I mean, is the plane going to crash anyway?
Well, fortunately, they got 2 pilots. There's a story which is false that American Airlines wouldn't permit 2 Christians to be co-pilots. But if one pilot's a Christian, the other one's not, the non-Christian will still be there.
Oh, so...
The Bible just doesn't enlighten us on details like that. It's sort of interesting to speculate.
You know, I'm sure there are atheists listening out there tonight, Doctor, and atheists like your book, too, because they want to find out about all this. But I'm sure there are atheists out there who say, wait a minute, those Jewish people were walking around in the desert a long time ago when all this stuff was written in the Bible, and at that time everybody thought the earth was flat, and if they were wrong about that, why are they right about what's going on today?
Well, I know that unbelief is an option we all have, but It's very simple. If you're in a house and someone tells you the house is on fire and you say, I don't believe it, well, if it's on fire, it's going to burn you up. And I think our world is like a house that's on fire, and we're trying to tell people to get ready to meet God by trusting in Christ, and they say, I don't want to do that. All right. There's results of faith and there's results of unbelief, and they're going to have to face the results.
Larry in Macon, you're on AM 750 WSB.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
I wanted to ask Dr. Walvoord a question.
All right.
In the 15th chapter of Revelations, would it be possible for me to comment on what you just said before I do this?
Sure.
You said something about the people believed that the earth was flat.
Yeah, I guess it was probably Christopher Columbus, wasn't it, according to what we understand, who proved to the world that the earth was round, because before Chris came over to the New World, everybody thought that if you got to the end of the flat earth, you'd fall off. I mean, isn't that what you learned?
Well, yes, but Dr. Walvoord could back this up. There's a place in the Bible, and I can't quote where it is. It said, and I saw the circle of the earth. So the Bible's always said the earth was round.
Is that true, Doctor?
I'm not familiar with that verse. I've got the 15th chapter in front of me. I don't see it quickly. But the Bible doesn't teach that the earth is flat. That's just an assumption that people had for want of a better explanation. But, of course, it isn't true, and the Bible doesn't teach it. It doesn't really go into scientific things like that.
Okay, go ahead with your comment there, Larry.
Okay, in the second verse of the 15th chapter, I was amazed. I knew I'd read this, but then when I was listening to the media talking about the heat turning sand into glass.
Yeah, I know. Let me be psychic here with you. That sounds just like a nuclear weapon, right?
It sure does.
What do you think? I've heard this probably a million times, and so have you, Doctor.
Well, I don't think it has anything to do with nuclear. In fact, it's talking about heaven, and they saw there something that looked like a sea of glass mixed with fire. And that's what he saw. That's up in heaven, not on earth.
Thank you for your call, because that's something I've always wondered about, too, Larry, and we hope you enjoyed the show.
Thank you.
AM 750 WSB's exclusive weather center forecast from our own meteorologist, Kirk Mellish. Looks like rain diminishing tonight. Low temperature is going to be 45, and there'll be breaks in the clouds tomorrow. Thank you, Wes. AM 750 WSB Sound Off here with Paul Gonzales. We'll be going live to Israel a little later on, and we'll also be going live to California and also the Midwest when this program will go nationwide. We'll also be heard on KFI in Los Angeles and WHIO in Dayton, Ohio. In fact, the announcer on Dayton station called our show as a Sound Off listener the other night. I can't wait to hear him and his contribution on the air. And that'll be coming up a little later on tonight, so I hope you'll stay with us. Right now, our guest is Dr. John F. Walvoord, who is a biblical scholar, and we're talking about Armageddon. Our next caller is going to be Ann in Loganville. And, Ann, you're on AM 750 WSB.
Hey, Paul.
Hi, Ann.
I just wanted to thank you for having the courage to have a show like this.
Well, it didn't take too much courage because a lot of people are interested in it.
Well, that's great. I was calling for those who have called and said that they aren't well read in the Bible. Perhaps those that are listening that aren't Christians at all. Was just wondering if I could give a verse to those. Besides Revelations is so deep, like 2 Timothy, where it talks about being strong and being a soldier of Christ, and warning that the difficult times will come. But if you do put your trust and your needs in the Lord, everything's going to be just fine.
All right, thank you for being so concise with that little sermon, okay?
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Steve in Gainesville, you're on AM 750 WSB.
Oh, hi, Doctor. Did you know that your host is always ridiculing Christians?
No, that's a blatant lie, and that's all the contribution that you can put on this radio show. Then adios, and may God bless you. Rick in Conyers, you're on AM 750 WSB.
Yeah, hey, Paul, thanks.
You're welcome.
Wondering, Doctor, what would be a good verse to read in the Bible about the rapture?
Read 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, 13 to 18, or 1 Corinthians 15, 51 to 58. Those are the two major passages.
I'll tell you one thing, Doctor, you certainly are concise with your answers. Bobby in Ackworth, you're on AM 750 WSB.
Yes. You guys excuse me right now. I've got a call. But I thought I heard him say earlier something about someone would rise, rule for 7 years. And I remember reading something in the Bible that said that someone from the east would rule or would rise and rule for 7 years.
Yeah, that's what.
Yes, anything about that?
Yeah, we talked about that earlier. You just tuned in, probably, huh?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, somebody will, but it's not Saddam Hussein.
That's what I figured.
Thank you, Bobby.
Okay, thank you.
John in Atlanta, you're on AM 750 WSB.
Hello, Paul. How you doing?
Fine, John.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to appreciate your show. It's very informative and everything.
Do you listen often?
Yes, I certainly do, but I'll be so nervous when I call.
Oh, don't worry about it. Being a regular listener, you know that I don't make a practice.
750 WSB, the 50,000-watt Clear Channel Voice of the South, presents Sound Off with Paul Gonzales. To be a part of our show, call 872-0750. That's 872-0750. Now, here's Paul Gonzales.
Don't forget, in less than an hour, we'll be taking you live to Israel, and we'll be talking with Merrill Simon. Those of you who were with us last night heard his words. He left the United States to go to Israel to be with his family, his sons, and his 10 grandchildren, and they are braced for the worst. And he'll be giving us a feeling about what it's like to be in Israel, which could be under attack, and that'll be coming up in less than an hour from now. And at midnight, we'll join with KFI Radio in Los Angeles and WHIO in Dayton, Ohio, two of the WSB-related radio stations. And we'll be covering a good portion of the country, so you'll be able to get the ideas and the opinions of people not only here in Atlanta, but all over the East, the Midwest, and parts of the West Coast of the United States. So if you have any friends out in those parts of the country, let them know that we'll be on Sound Off, and also the announcers on KFI and WHIO will be with us, too. And we'll have a great big neighborhood. This is already one of the largest radio neighborhoods in America, and it will be 3 times as large after 12 midnight. Our guest right now is Dr. John Walvoord, who is a biblical scholar and author of Armageddon, Oil, and the Middle East Crisis. This is not your first book. You've written a couple of dozen of them, right?
Yes. I've written quite a few books.
Next, we go to Elgin, Illinois. And Gene, you're on AM 750 WSB.
Hello, Paul.
Yeah.
I would like to make a comment to Dr. Walvoord, and then I have 3 short questions for him.
Okay, real short,
Okay,
because we got a lot of people to get to here.
Right. As a blind person, I'm personally looking forward to the second coming, when the Lord will come back and give me all my sight back.
That'll be a wonderful day.
Yes, it is. It's going to be. I have 3 questions. Where do you, in this present crisis, what's your thoughts about Russia with the crisis and the mess that they're in now?
All right, let's take that question.
All right, I've been predicting for a long time that communism would fail because communism is not in the Bible. It's a dictatorship, yes, but not communism. And the only reference I have for the future of Russia is found in Ezekiel 38:39, and where a country to the far north of Israel is described as joining with 6 other countries and attacking Israel in a sneak attack. Now, it ends up in disaster because God interferes and wipes the armies out. But that apparently is going to be the last gasp of Russia, the last attempt they've got to try to get world control. And that's in the future. I believe it's after the rapture of the church. I believe it's in the first half of that last 7 years when Israel's at peace and not expecting an attack. But that's the only thing I know about Russia in the future.
Okay, just 2 other real quick questions.
Let's take them one at a time, okay?
There's a lot of speculation that if and Saddam Hussein has said if we attack Iraq, that they are going to attack Israel. How do you feel about this, putting Israel into this war and then turning the Arabs, all the Arab nations, possibly against the United States?
Well, I don't have any feeling in the matter. I have no control over it. I don't think that Saudi Arabia is going to change because they got their own country to protect. I think they're going to stay with the United States. What the other Arab nations do is another question. But I don't think they're going to destroy Israel. Israel's got some sad days ahead, according to the Bible, but I don't know in this particular war whether they're going to be seriously hurt. And I think Hussein is making a big mistake because Israel has the atomic weapons. They could wipe him out if they wanted to, and he's going to severely be damaged by Israel.
Well, according to what is predicted in the Bible, Israel can't be annihilated because Israel has to be there for the fulfillment of these Bible prophecies.
That's right. Now, in the Great Tribulation, Zechariah 13:8 says that 2 out of 3 of the Israelites in the land will perish. They're going to have a situation like the Germans did and Jews did in Germany during World War II. But they're not exterminated. They're still the godly remnant that's ready to meet Christ at His second coming.
Well, just one other question, Paul.
All right.
How does He put us after this, if this war does take place, with all the Arab peoples after this war is over? And Paul, thank you for the call.
Oh, thank you for taking the time to call me tonight, Gene.
God bless you, Dr. Wadsworth.
Well, I take it, as explained early in the broadcast, I think maybe out of it will come this 10-nation group the Bible speaks of, and then out of it will come the dictator. But it isn't Hussein, and he will eventually become a world ruler and be the Antichrist, the opponent of Christ, in the period just before the second coming. Now, I don't know what the time schedule on that is because I don't know how fast these things are going to move.
Next call, Nancy in Woodstock. You're on AM 750 WSB.
Well, okay, number one, I'll just talk about Revelations is frightening me. And number two, I have a crazy question here, but what is being saved? And what about, I hear about people talking about getting saved, and it's just shouting and excitement, and what about people that have tried, and I'm like me, and I can't understand. It's like, what if I'm not ready in time or whatever? It's
well,
kind
actually,
of
being saved is a simple matter, though it's very complex, too. You have to believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, that He's what He claims to be in the Bible, and that He died on the cross for our sins and rose again. And the Bible says if you believe that and put your trust in Christ as your Savior, you're saved. Now, you have to stop looking at your own feelings and look at what the Bible promises. Christ said, "Him that cometh unto me, I will in no wise cast out." And you can't come to Christ in simple, childlike faith and trust Him for salvation without getting saved.
So do you believe...
You feel that's what's going to happen.
Do you believe that stuff?
You know what? I believe this. I really do. I have faith, but what worries me is the people that say, well, you're supposed to be shouting, and I don't know, they act crazy, and I think,
well, that isn't normal for the Christian life.
Pardon me?
That's not normal for the Christian life. There are Christians that do that, but it's not necessary.
I think, oh no, I'm not getting that rush.
Well, there's nothing wrong with those people who holler and shout and all that kind of stuff and speak in tongues, right, Doctor?
No, but the point is that doesn't save them.
Okay, so Nancy, you're saved.
Oh, I feel better.
Good.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I suppose a lot of people, that was a good caller, Doctor. A lot of people wonder, there are so many different brands of Christianity. One group will tell you got to do this, and one group will tell you got to do that, and it has a lot of people concerned, doesn't it?
Well, faith in Christ is the bottom line, and I always say that's the bottom line today. Really, what's happening in the Middle East isn't the number one problem. The number one problem is what our relationship to Christ is, because we have to face the fact that we're going to encounter Him very soon down the road. And if you aren't ready, you should get ready by trusting Him. Well, the rapture occurs before all that 7-year period.
Oh, I see. So,
in fact, I think it's before in fact, the Bible teaches that this world dictator, the one that conquers the 10 countries, can't appear until after the rapture, in my estimation.
So the rapture could happen tomorrow.
Yeah, it's an imminent event. It's always possible any day.
Bosco and Marietta, you're on AM 750 WSB.
How you doing?
All right, Bosco.
Yeah, I'd like to say something to the lady that just called about being saved. If you want to know how to be saved, read Acts in your Bible, and it'll tell you. And if you need help, just go to your local Church of Christ and ask the minister to help you out. But I just wanted to say that people are taking this man, your guest, they act like he's the final word on the book of Revelation, but I just want to note that a lot of what he says is opinion, and the book of Revelations can be interpreted different ways.
That was like a Baptist preacher told me one time. He says, Paul, the reason why we have so much problem with religion is everybody's Bible seems to read differently.
That's right, Paul. I understand what you're saying.
So before you continue, what kind of reaction do you have to that? I'm sure you've been challenged before, Doctor. You've been around a while.
I don't buy that. I don't think the Bible gives all these opinions justifiable base. What you have to do is, first of all, determine what the Bible actually says. Now, in the book of Revelation, you have a lot of symbols. But even there, after it gives you the symbol, it often tells you what it means. And while there are some things in Revelation that perhaps I don't understand, the main idea is very clear that Christ is coming back, and that's a very literal event. And there's going to be a great number of catastrophes beforehand, and that's very literal. There's going to be a world government. Every kindred, tongue, and people are going to be under his sway. And that's a literal thing. I don't have the trouble that some people do. I just wrote a book, another book besides Armageddon. It's an 800-page book that attempts to explain every prophecy in the Bible. And I thought I was going to have a lot of trouble, though I've taught prophecy a long time. But I found I just had to take the passage, what does it say, what does it mean, and write it down. And I found that half the prophecies of the Bible have been literally fulfilled. That's why I believe the future prophecies will also be literally fulfilled. Now, I don't buy this, that the Bible teaches a half a dozen theories.
Yeah, I agree a lot with what your guest says. He's very knowledgeable in the Bible. But I want to shed a little different light on the book of Revelation and saying that it did say in the book that these things must shortly come to pass, didn't it?
Well, actually, the proper translation will come to pass quickly.
Yeah.
Once they come to pass, things are going to happen awful fast.
Well, what I'd like to say to you is that I think that many of the things in the book of Revelations have already been fulfilled.
Well, see, they haven't been fulfilled literally. You haven't had a fourth of the earth destroyed, as in chapter 6. A third of the remainder destroyed in chapter 9.
Well,
you haven't had the great catastrophes that the Bible speaks of.
Yeah, I think the fall of the Roman Empire, a lot of that was symbolic, the plagues, the locusts.
You're not interpreting it literally, and I take it literally.
Well, it's not literal, sir. I think it's an apocalyptic letter, and a lot of it was symbolic.
You know, but when the Bible gives you a symbol and then explains it, you can't say the explanation is symbolic. The explanation is literal. And I understand, and you've got a lot of people that agree with you, but I think it's wrong.
And that's the end of round 2. It's 11:18. Our guest is Dr. John Walvoord, author of many books. His latest is called Armageddon, Oil, and the Middle East Crisis. He's saying that this deal that's going on right now in the Gulf crisis is a prelude to Armageddon. And this is AM 750 WSB.
Atlanta's news, weather, and traffic station.
To put the Emir back in power, who is no more democratic, no more believer in freedom than Hussein is. We get barely 2% of our oil from Kuwait, and the countries that do get considerable amounts from it apparently could care less because they have no troops there. And the comparison of Hussein to Hitler, I think, is preposterous. He couldn't even beat Iran in a 7-year war. Much less defeat Syria, Turkey, or Israel. I think we've forgotten the lesson we learned in Vietnam. In Vietnam, we heard the same kind of vague assertions of national interest. We are right now in the exact same position we would have been had not a single American soldier died, and our interests are in no way undermined.
Well, clearly and strongly stated, sir. Let me go with that to Steve Bryant. The caller says he's not heard a single reason, either moral, strategic, or political, to justify the loss of a single American life.
Of course, that's his point of view, but I don't think he's been listening too clearly to what's been happening, what the president's been saying. And I fully support the president on this.
It's like I can't even see men without seeing the whole complete scenario, and I won't start.
Crisis at the Gulf. Updates from the AM 750 WSB News Center.
This is a live special report from AP Network News. Crisis in the Gulf. I'm Sean Anderson. If you've ever wondered where the term the 11th hour comes from, you're witnessing it right now. There's just 40 minutes remaining until the midnight Eastern time deadline set by the United Nations for Iraq to pull its troops out of Kuwait. After the clock strikes midnight, Iraq is at risk for an attack from the American-led multinational forces gathered in the Saudi desert. There have been several last-minute appeals for Saddam to pull his troops out, including one from UN Secretary General Javier Perez de Cuellar.
As the 15 January advances and the world stands poised between peace and war, I most sincerely appeal to President Saddam Hussein to turn the course of events away from catastrophe and towards a new era of justice and harmony.
But there are no indications at this point that Saddam is willing to comply. In the Middle East, American troops have been waiting to perhaps go to war. Let's get the setup from the AP's Tony Winton.
Well, Sean, there is an air of expectation in Saudi Arabia as the final hour before the deadline slips away. It is reinforced by the knowledge that some units have taken forward positions. For days now, there has been an exodus of civilians from the area. Many airlines have stopped serving the Dhahran airport. As for troop morale, soldiers say it is high, but it is a nervous feeling that is detected. Some say they are scared by the thought of combat, but almost universally, soldiers say after months of waiting, they are ready for it. Sean?
The AP's Tony Winton in Saudi Arabia. This has been a live special report from AP Network News. Crisis in the Gulf. I'm Sean Anderson, and this is the Associated Press Radio Network.
AM 750 WSB monitors the Gulf story around the clock with updates every hour and half hour, and we'll break in with new developments as they happen on AM 750 WSB.
AM 750 WSB, and of course most of our visit tonight has been about the Middle East. We brought you a Middle East expert from a historical perspective, and a lot of people believe that the Bible gives us prophecies regarding the Middle East, and one of those folks is Dr. John F. Walvoord, who is a highly respected theologian and author of many books, including the latest Armageddon, Oil, and the Middle East Crisis. And our next call is Mary in Ackworth, and Mary, you're on AM 750 WSB.
Yes, Paul, thank you for giving us this opportunity. I had a comment, and I wanted the doctor to just elaborate on it.
Okay, let's get to it now.
Okay.
I'm not trying to rush you, but you know you had to wait a half hour.
Okay. One of the literal fulfillments of prophecy has been the regathering of Israel. And the doctor mentioned World War I, World War II, and I'm sure there's been other times when people thought the end was coming, but I may be wrong in this, but is not the regathering of Israel something that would take place before the Lord would come back? I mean, the temple's going to have to be rebuilt.
Yes, you're correct. What we're seeing, I think, is the Bible predicts the restoration of Israel, but it's by stages. The first stage, they have to be organized as a political state. That happened in 48.
Right.
The second stage, they're going to have this peace treaty when this world dictator comes on the scene. The third stage is their terrible persecution in the Great Tribulation. The fourth stage is following the second coming, when Christ completes the regathering of Israel. In fact, every Jew all over the world will be brought back to their ancient land. So what we're seeing is the beginning of this, and I think it's very significant that in the Bible, whenever it talks about the end time, Israel's back in the land, and of course they've just come back in the 20th century, but I think that's a sign that we're getting to the end.
Paul, it would be a shame for you to miss the rapture after you let us have this program.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad that you're enjoying the show.
It's great. Thank you very much.
If you're interested in this, Paul, I wrote the religious editor, I think his name is Herschel, the Chicago Tribune, wrote a front page article on this in the Chicago Tribune, the Sunday paper. And I mentioned the fact it'd be interesting to stick around after the rapture to see what the media would say about it. And he captured that in the last sentence of his article. He said, Walvoord believes that not all the media are going to be saved, and some of them will be able to report the rapture.
Probably a lot of them will be around to report the rapture.
I'm afraid there will be.
You've got a great sense of humor there, John, I'll tell you. Can you stay a few more minutes with us?
Sure.
Okay, maybe, let's see, 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes, something like that?
All right.
That's great. And we're going to be going to Israel a little later on. We've got so many people who've waited so long to talk to our guest tonight, received so well all over the country, that we're going to keep him over just a few more minutes. Then about 10 minutes before the top of the hour, we will call Merrill Simon in Israel, find out what the feeling is there. It'll be early in the morning over there. And then after midnight, Merrill will stay with us a few more minutes and talk to the nation. We'll be on KFI, 50,000 watts all over the west coast of the United States. And then we'll also be going to Dayton, Ohio, and also talking all over the Midwest. So you stay right with us. An exciting evening, even though a somber one for many people, as we wonder what's going to happen in terms of war. Next call is Mark in Marietta. And Mark, you're on AM 750 WSB.
Yes, I've got a question for you, Doctor. I'm not real clear about the Jews. Will the Jews actually be saved? And do they believe in Jesus, and will they be in heaven? I just wondered, I knew they didn't believe that Jesus came to earth the first time.
Good question. I know a lot of people are thinking about that, Doctor.
Well, we're not saved because we're either Jew or Gentile. We're saved through personal faith in Christ. And there's quite a few Jews, particularly the last 10 to 15 years, that have become Christians. I know a number of them. And there will be Christians among the Jews, and they'll be saved. Now, a person who's not a Christian, whether he's Jew or Gentile, is not saved. And that's the simplicity of it.
I thought the Jews were going to get a special chance.
Well, they're going to be saved as a nation. That is, they're going to be nationally restored. But even there, it's only the godly remnant that's restored, according to Zechariah and other passages. In other words, at the second coming of Christ, the unsaved, regardless of their background and race, will be purged out, and only the saved will enter the millennial kingdom.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That was an excellent question.
Mm-hmm.
And let's take one quick question, and then we'll continue. Let's try Arnold. I wonder if he has a quick question. Arnold in Conyers, you're on AM 750 WSB.
Yes, sir, I sure do. I got one question, that's it.
All right, real quick.
And I'm enjoying your show.
Thank you, sir.
We believe the rapture. There's no question about it going to be a catching away. I need one scripture to tell me that it's going to be before the tribulation, which I've always, read the scriptures being added to tribulation, the rapture is. And could you give me one scripture and one verse, or chapter or verse?
All right.
Well, that's a question that's often raised because a lot of people think the rapture is a part of Armageddon and the second coming. But you have to turn it around the other way. Is there one scripture that says there's a rapture at the second coming? Now, if you go to Revelation 19, where you have a detailed account of the second coming of Christ, there's no mention of the rapture. And in fact, nobody's raptured at that time because they go into the millennial kingdom if they're saved in their natural bodies. They're not changed. On the other hand, the rapture is always presented in the Bible as an imminent event. We never have a sign before the rapture, and the second coming is coming to set up his kingdom, has many signs. Most of the book of Revelation constitutes a sign of events that precede it. So you're right. You can't find a verse that says pre, and you can't find a verse that says post. You have to do it by comparing the scriptures. Now read 1 Thessalonians 4 and 1 Corinthians 15, and then compare it to Revelation 19. You'll see they're two totally different events. The rapture is a movement from earth to heaven. The second coming is a movement from heaven to earth, and it's totally different in what precedes the event itself and what follows. And so I'm a firm believer in the pre-tribulation rapture, though I recognize that many people disagree.
Our guest is Dr. John F. Walvoord, and he's the author of Armageddon, Oil in the Middle East. And he's saying that this Iraqi crisis is a prelude to Armageddon. This is Paul Gonzales, and you're with AM 750 WSB. With the Kim in Oakwood, you're on AM 750 WSB, and hello there, Kim.
Hi. I'd like to know if your guest feels that America is in Bible prophecy, and if so, who are we? What are we called in the Bible?
We had questions often raised, but as far as I know, nothing in the Western Hemisphere, North America, South America, or Central America, is in the Bible. The trouble is that the center of Bible prophecy is Jerusalem in the land of Israel, and we're on the opposite side of the world. It's also true, I believe personally, that in the end time, America is going to lose a lot of its power. Well, as my understanding, when the rapture occurs, every Christian will be taken out of the world. America today is a bastion of Christian missionary effort, money, and personnel. 75% of the missionary effort comes from our country. Once the rapture occurs, that's all disbanded immediately, and I think America is going to go down real fast. We deserve it. We're not a good nation. We're not a moral nation as we should be. There's a lot of things wrong. I think God's going to judge us for it.
What about those nations that are predominantly Christian? Let's say maybe a Latin American country where almost everybody's a Christian.
Well, Guatemala has a high percentage of evangelical Christians. They're going to be raptured. And what's left is going to be the non-Christian world.
Good question there, caller. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Don in Atlanta, you're on AM 750 WSB.
Well, I have some different points of view.
That's good. That's healthy, isn't it?
Yes, sir. First of all, the question has come up many times as to the timing. I have two books in front of me that say that the time of the end is a generation. One is published by Tim LaHaye, a noted Baptist minister, in 1982, and he said the time of the end is a generation that, until history, quoting, produces a more acceptable fulfillment, it's reasonable to conclude that 1914 ushered in the beginning of the end.
Well, I know Tim LaHaye very well, but I happen to disagree. It's based on Matthew 24, where it says, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Now, I take it that this generation refers to Israel, the fig tree in the context he thinks is Israel, and that Israel being restored is a generation is the time between a person is born and the time he has a child, roughly 40 years, we could say. And they say that has to happen in 40 years, but it hasn't worked out that way. And I think it's the wrong interpretation. The generation that Matthew 24 is talking about is the generation that's going to see the future Great Tribulation. You see, Matthew 24 does not talk about the restoration of Israel. It talks about the Great Tribulation. And I think it's a misunderstanding of that passage. Now, there's plenty of people who agree with him. But I think that my position is more justified on the basis of the Bible.
You disagree with him, but y'all are pals, right?
Oh, yeah. I've been on the same platform. I've been in his church when he was a pastor. Yes, we can disagree on some things without being disagreeable.
Well, that's America.
I'm not being disagreeable, but something needs to be pointed out. First of all, the Babylon, Revelation chapter 17, is not ancient Babylon. The Encyclopedia Britannica, what you have open, says that it has been a ruin and is unoccupied, but there is nearby it a modern town, Al-Hilah. It was in a ruin 12 centuries ago.
Well, I disagree with it. Babylon has had inhabitants ever since Nebuchadnezzar's day, and it has them today. A very small group, but nevertheless, it's never been deserted. But the Bible pictures it's going to be judged and ultimately deserted completely, but that's at the time of the second coming of Christ. That's still future.
Thanks for your call. And let's see, Doug in Gwinnett County, you're on AM 750 WSB.
Hello, Paul. Enjoying your show a lot.
Thank you.
I just want to make a couple of comments. It's so interesting, shows like this, and I think that many times people, when we're talking about the Bible, feel a sense of confusion, perhaps, that we look at it as a very difficult book, and just a couple of comments about that. I think that we sometimes are afraid of it just because maybe sometimes of things we hear. When Christianity really is not even religion. Jesus himself denounced religion. He wanted us to have a relationship with God through him, and that's really all it is. And the Bible is more like a guidebook for us. But the problem I think people have in picking up a Bible, and we often do this, we read a couple of chapters and we put it down. It's sort of like trying to read a Tom Clancy novel if you're not into technical fiction. You have to be first in an attitude that you can receive it, because the Bible itself states in Corinthians, as a matter of fact, 1 Corinthians 2:14, that a natural man will not be able to receive the things of the Spirit.
I've heard this before. What's your opinion about that, Doctor?
Oh, you're right. I think that one of the problems with people is they're not Christians. A person who's not indwelt by the Holy Spirit, who's not a Christian, is not in good shape to be a good interpreter of the Bible. And I feel he's right. It takes spiritual discernment. It takes guidance, God's guidance for us to understand the Bible. But I believe the Bible is written for our understanding, even though we do not always completely understand it.
And I think it's, I think people really should, though, read it themselves, because I'm sure you've heard this old joke. The guy was asked, well, how do you feel about the Bible? He says, I don't know. There's my preacher. Go ask him. That's not the way to go, is it?
No, well, I've taught the Bible, the whole Bible, many times, gone through the whole Scriptures, every verse, and taught it. There is a meaning to verses, and sometimes we have to say we don't know for sure. But most of the things in the Bible, I think, yield to study if a person is a Christian, if he's got some spiritual insight.
Hey, thank you for your call, Doug.
I had one more comment here.
Real quick.
The Bible did say, as a matter of fact, it tells us that we should study diligently to learn it. Along the lines of how it's difficult is.
Okay, there's a problem here, Doug. We're getting away from the subject. We have so much to talk about here. We're getting right off the center. I appreciate your call, though. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. AM 750 WSB time is 11:38.
Reaching for that dream that spells tomorrow. Well, another generation is a-coming on. I see America working harder every day to educate her people to live a better way. Hey, wouldn't you like to feel another shoulder at the wheel? If you help me join the line, you pull your weight and I'll pull mine. Hey, we share some wonderful dreams. Please help turn these dreams into realities. Please give to the United Negro College Fund. We want to give our best. Please understand. We're not asking for a handout, just a hand. A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Crisis in the Gulf. Update. I'm Bob Glasscoff in the AM 750 WSB News Center. Still no sign that Iraq has any intention of leaving Kuwait, with the UN deadline now minutes away. Details coming up at 12 midnight.
And, of course, that is just about 20 minutes away. And of course, we'll be bringing you news around the clock, and if anything happens, we'll, of course, break in, and that's on AM 750 WSB. You can depend on it. Are you a Bell South Mobility customer? You can call our talk shows free, 872-0750. That'll be a free call on your Bell South Mobility phone. Our guest is Dr. John F. Walvoord, who wrote the book Armageddon, Oil in the Middle East Crisis. Next call is John in Kennesaw. And John, you're on AM 750 WSB.
Hello, Paul.
Hello, John.
I listen to you quite often, and on the way home from work every night, and usually I'm disagreeing with you, and you get chewed out all the way home. But tonight, I must congratulate you. This is in my opinion, the best guest that I've ever heard on your show. And I'm familiar with the doctor, familiar with some of his work. And
well, by the way, thank you so much. He told me off the air that you all are some of the best callers, right, Doc?
That's right. It's one of the better programs.
Yeah, well, that's the best one I've heard on your show, Paul. And
well, you got to admit, I give it all to you. I give you every single side of it.
Yes, Ben. And thank you. Thank you for the show tonight.
You're welcome. That's all?
That's it.
Well, that's awful nice of you. You waited a long time to say that. Thank you.
Well,
thank you. For me, too.
That was very thoughtful of him, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
All righty.
All righty. Joe in Villa Rica, you're on AM 750 WSB. See, usually when somebody gives a compliment like that, there's a comma, and then they say, but.
Yeah, I know.
But that guy, hey, that was nice. It was thoughtful of him. Hello, Joe. You're on AM 750 WSB.
Hello, sir. It's glad to be on here, and I'm glad to hear you're talking about something that I like to listen to.
Well, this is the Bible Belt, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Actually, this is the buckle of the Bible Belt, isn't it, Doctor?
Yep.
Yes. Well, let me ask. I was talking with my dad earlier, and he was talking about the Six-Day War that was with Israel.
What was that, 1967? Wasn't that the 67 war, Doctor?
Yes, well, it's a war that went so fast that the world couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it possible that could happen again, something similar to that?
Oh, I don't know. The Bible didn't predict that war particularly, and it doesn't tell us things like that, I don't think. But Israel is a special people. I believe God has a special plan for them, and to some extent He protects them, but He also allows them to bear the burden of the wrong decisions they have made, and that's why they also suffer. And, of course, Gentiles and non-Jewish people have the same experience.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, sir.
All righty. Murray on a car phone. You're on AM 750 WSB.
Yeah, Paul. I've been listening to the conversation this evening, and it all seems to be slanted very much one way. I'm finding, though, something leaving kind of a bad taste in my mouth. Here's a gentleman who has put out a book with a title worthy of a National Enquirer headline, promoting his particular religion as it relates to confrontation in the Middle East that's going to cost the lives of an awful lot of our young American boys. And I just, it really is, I mean, counting down to midnight, talking about one religion, and one religion on this planet, which is not even the majority religion, in this smugness that this is the proof that this religion is correct. You've got Saddam Hussein making equally strong statements on his side that is the right and the justification for Islam.
That is that's an appropriate comment. I'm sure over in Baghdad they're saying other things about what this war means, Doctor.
Yes, well, let's face it, there isn't any such thing as a majority religion unless it be unbelief. But and Christianity is a very particular religion. It's a minority religion. Only a minority of the world's population are genuine Christians. I agree to that. Somebody has to be right and somebody has to be wrong, and I hope that what I believe and what I teach is the truth.
Yeah, but I mean, that seems like a very arrogant and smug attitude, promoting it from time to time.
It's not arrogant to believe your convictions. You can believe anything you want to.
Well, yes, but Saddam Hussein is making the same statements, and he is functioning from the same presumption of correctness. I mean, Kuwait, he says, was incorrectly divided from his country, and he feels he is, in the eyes of Allah, the God-given correct ruler for the people of Islam. I mean, I'm not, that's not my religion. Those guys scare the heck out of me. But, you know, here we are. We're counting down, and we're promoting a book that's tying into the nice, comfortable theories of the rapture. I mean, to say where, you know, the Christian pilot of an airplane is going to be zapped out of a plane and everyone else is dead. Gee, gosh, what a nice Christian thing to do. You know, I mean, you know, I guess that's my statement, Paul.
Well, Murray, I respect what you're saying. And yeah, if you've heard my show before,
I understand where you come from.
Yeah, you understand that I happen to have a little different belief about the world. I believe that everybody who does the correct thing and worships some kind of God is going to make it. But I try to give people every possible facet of these arguments, and you have to admit, you've heard how many calls we've taken here in the last segment. This is a topic that interests Christians, and we happen to be in a predominantly Christian country.
I understand that, and I've been driving home listening to predominantly Christian calls, and
I'm glad you called. In fact,
in with a slightly different perspective.
In fact, just to prove to you, Murray, that I do bring it all to you, on January the 31st, we'll have comedian Steve Allen on the show, and Steve Allen is going to do a critique on the Bible. And even though he is, I believe he's a Presbyterian, he says that a lot of what is said in the Bible is purely myth. So your perspective will be coming along here on January the 31st. I'm sure you want to be listening.
Oh, okay. And you should also maybe do a show on Mr. Mark Twain's Letters from Earth. That might be an interesting show, too.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. I can understand this caller, Doctor. There are some people who have a different perspective, and they believe that some of the things that Christians say are arrogant, but people, no matter who they are and whatever perspective they're coming from, as you said, have to believe in something, and your belief happens to be different, but you stand by it.
Well, my belief is based upon a Bible, which I think is a supernatural belief, and the rest of them don't have a Bible. Even the Quran doesn't have the proof, interior proof that it's true, like the Bible does. And that's my opinion. You understand, a lot of people disagree. But I believe that I'm based it upon what I think is called divine revelation.
Doctor, you have had a tremendous response from our listeners all over the country tonight. You've been a terrific guest. You've put some good humor in it, and we hope that you take some of your valuable time to be on our show again. I know you've been on over 1,000 radio stations here recently, and I hope you'll be on our show again sometime.
All right, give me another call.
And I want to tell the people that they can get this book by calling 1-800-444-4012. That's 1-800-444-4012. We've talked a lot about Israel here in the past segment of our show. We're going to go to Israel live on the phone and talk to Merrill Simon here in just a few minutes and find out what the mood is, as it is early morning in the Middle East. And this is AM 750 WSB. Our exclusive Weather Center forecast from our own meteorologist Kirk Mellish says rain diminishing tonight, low temperature 45. Tomorrow breaks in the clouds, breezy and cool, high 52, low 35. And tomorrow partly cloudy with a high of 46. It's currently 50 degrees, and this is AM 750 WSB.
Each of us has to go through many things in life that are quite difficult. Things like giving a speech in class.
Ponce de Leon searched for the mountain of food. The mountain of vermouth.
Or trying to survive a trigonometry course.
Bobby Marley.
Yes?
Please come to the board and show us how the cosine of the isosceles triangle is directly proportional to the reverse tangent of the opposite angle.
Fortunately, some things we have to do are quite easy, like selective service registration. Every young man within 1 month of his 18th birthday has to register. It's required by law, but it's simple. Only takes 5 minutes. All you do is fill out a card at any post office. We're lucky some tasks are as easy as selective service registration. That way we can save our strength for those more unpleasant tasks.
Bobby, great news. You've been chosen to sing at the reunion ball. Oh, you're kidding, Mom. I can't sing.
Selective service registration. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the law.
Ever wonder why other radio stations don't have traffic reports every 6 minutes? Well, they just can't. See, their reporters work for more than one radio station. They're just too busy to keep breaking in on the one station you're listening to. They're waiting in line. Not here. Our Scott Slade and Joy Cashin work full-time for AM 750, WSB. That's why you'll hear them here 10 times an hour, every 6 minutes during rush hour traffic. We're never too busy to give you traffic information when it happens. That's why we are AM 750, WSB. Depend on it.
Could a Muslim ever fire on another Muslim? That could be one of the questions we face if war breaks out in the Middle East. Hi, this is Wes Minner. We'll talk about that plus other Persian Gulf issues tomorrow from 1 until 4. Stimulating talk radio for your mid-afternoons, and it originates right here in Atlanta, where you can be a part of it. Now more of Sound Off and Paul Gonzales on AM 750 WSB.
AM 750 WSB, and we're very busily trying to get Meryl Simon in Israel. And what we're doing here, folks, is we are working with different telephone systems. Tom Newton, our producer, Tom, I'm going to have to tell you here on the air, what you have to get is a line that you don't have to dial 9 on, which is one of those 872-0750 numbers, if we can get somebody to get off those phones. In the meantime, let me say hello to Nathan in Smyrna. Hello, Nathan. You're on AM 750 WSB.
Hello. I wanted to talk to Dr. Walvoord, but he's just gone off the air, I believe.
Yeah, he has, but how do you feel about what he had to say?
Oh, I was very interested. In fact, this is the first time I've ever called on a radio station, and I'm a little nervous right now. But
don't worry about it.
Okay, I just want to make a comment on the rebuilding of the temple that was mentioned a little bit before. Do you remember the uprising that happened in Jerusalem when some of the Palestinians stoned some Israelis and the police retaliated by killing some of them?
Yeah, it's been just recently.
In fact, the media didn't pick up on this, but some sources had told me that the reason that they were stoning the Israelis was because some of the rabbis were installing the cornerstone to rebuild the temple. And so that's a pretty interesting fact there. And the reason they were stoning the Israelis is because the side of the cornerstone would cause the temple or the mosque, that's the second most holiest place of the Islamic people, it would have to be dismantled for the temple to be rebuilt that the Israelis want to worship in.
Did you agree basically with what our guest had to say tonight?
Yes, pretty much so I did.
Yeah, he had a little bit of controversy with some of the callers because I still maintain that everybody's Bible reads differently. You know, there are so many interpretations of the Bible, but this man that we brought on is probably one of the most respected biblical scholars in the country. And I'm just glad we had such tremendous response. And unfortunately, a lot of people are asking for interviews because the Bible, of course, prophesies the Middle Eastern situation, and we're right in the middle of it.
Yes.
Well, we do appreciate your call. Thank you.
Thank you.
AM 750 WSB, and we're trying to get in touch with Meryl Simon here. If we don't get him in the next couple of minutes, why don't we take a break, and then I'll call him there, Tom. Take a short break. I'm good with phones. And we'll call up Meryl Simon and see how things are in Israel. And then in a few minutes after the midnight hour, we're going to join up with KFI Radio, 50,000 watts in Los Angeles, and WHIO, 50,000 watts in Dayton, Ohio, which was the original Cox radio station. And we're going to talk to folks all over the country right here on AM 750 WSB.
Why do I give blood? Jim, he's my husband. He was walking back to the office one day when suddenly he collapsed. It was lucky a friend was there to catch him. It was his heart. The doctor said Jim's arteries were blocked. He needed a quadruple bypass, and that can take a lot of blood. They let me see Jim in the recovery room. There were ugly tubes coming out of him, and he looked so gray and helpless. But he was alive. And I thought, dear God, I've never seen anything so beautiful. Jim was lucky. But there are other Jims who need blood, so every couple of months I give some. And I think we're pretty lucky, Jim and me.
When was the last time you gave blood? A message from the National Blood Resource Education Program. If the world were indeed a perfect place, clients would approve every proposal. Profits would consistently exceed even the most optimistic projections. The customer would always be right. The check would, in fact, be in the mail. And employees would never need to request time off to serve with the National Guard and Reserve. But then again, if the world were indeed a perfect place, we wouldn't need the National Guard and Reserve. For the time being, however, we do. They make up more than 40% of our nation's defense. Something to remember the next time an employee needs time off to serve. Something to remember until the world is indeed a perfect place. A place where copy machines never break down, where elevator...
Be a hero. Give your employees the freedom to protect ours. A public service message from the National Committee for Employer Support of the Guard and Reserve and the Ad Council.
AM 750 WSB. Well, Meryl Simon is no doubt okay in Israel, but we got a recording. As I might imagine, all international circuits are busy, being as it's almost at the midnight hour, that very sobering hour. I'm sure that a lot of folks are calling Israel to talk to their friends and family members. So we'll try to connect up with Meryl Simon in Israel right after the midnight news, in addition to the fact that we're going to be joining up with KFI in Los Angeles and WHIO in Dayton, our sister stations, and we're going to get opinions from all over the United States on this particular issue of the Middle East. And Vic in Fayetteville, you're on AM 750 WSB.
Yes, I'd just like to say that, the Bible says in Revelation that, that Christ will come like a thief in the night. And that, here it is, a lot of people are expecting, well, this is, there's the war in the Persian Gulf, possibly Armageddon and everything, and that, that this might be, as the beginning of the end and everything. And
yeah, but our guest did say that it would be at least 7 years before this would all happen. So, it's according to him, it's not around the corner.
Yeah.
Well, it's around the corner in one sense, but I'm sure that whatever military action that we take in Iraq is not going to take 7 years. It won't be an 8-year war like Iraq had with Iran.
I agree. As personally, I think that as if the United States doesn't declare war within the first, by about say 2 o'clock, roughly it'll be within about a 48-hour period that that we will have military action. But as far as with this being the end of the world and the time of the rapture and everything, I don't think that this is quite the time that Christ will come. At a time where he's going to be at least expected. Like this time of crisis will have already occurred. And then afterwards, there will be a time of peace.
Yeah, well, that's what our guest said. He said that the rapture could occur at any time, and then there would be 3.5 years of peace and 3.5 years of big-time problems, and then Armageddon. But there is many opinions about this, as there are religions.